Greetings all, D&Disability here, coming at you with an interview with an intersection between queer theory, disability theory, and gender studies. I have an interview coming up for you. Here's an associate friend of mine by the name of Sapphire. She's a big part of Bill's community. Hi, Bill. And we have a few questions that we are going to run through today. The first one
Okay.
for you, Sapphire, is can I get your age, what age bracket you're in, if not the specific age? And can I get your gender, if you'd be so kind?
Sure. Um, I was born in 1970, so everybody can do the math. I'll let you figure out. And I am a female.
Okay, okay. Odd question to start off with, but let's just set a baseline, which is what makes you consider yourself part of the RPG community? Where do you fit into the RPG community?
Well, it's kind of a complex one. I grew up in Wisconsin, not far from Lake Geneva, so pretty much the birthplace of AD&D and TSR. I was very fortunate. My family was very supportive. Um, and so when I grew up, my dad offered myself and my brother the opportunity every time he went to the bookstore, he would let us know when he was going and we could join him. And if we went with him, we could pick out a book and he would buy it for us. I went every single time. My little brother didn't, but that's on him. um, but that's how I got my role-playing games. Um, TSR being that close in that, I mean, I started from the beginning with the box sets and everything else like that. And my dad was a huge science fiction reader and fantasy. And so I never had to deal with any of the satanic panic or anything like that. And they were supportive of my interests, including, RPGs. So I was very fortunate that way.
You must have been very fortunate because those books, even by, let's say this is the late 70s, early 80s, that they're expensive even. We're talking about people complaining about 40 or $50 books today, $60 books today. They were still about the same then. If
Well,
you
actually, I think because of where we were at in that, they were in that, 12 to $15 range, I think most of them when they first came out.
Mhm, mhm,
And they were a little bit more, I think, because a lot of the science fiction books on that back then were like between $6 and $10, so a little bit more. But I mean, my dad kept up with the agreement. He's like,
mhm.
you know, you want to pick it out, and it's something that is going to expand your mind. Go for it. So,
How did you get into your first role-playing group?
well, at first, we started out with computers early as well. Our first computer was an Atari 400. And that was back in 79. And I taught myself how to program it. So we had a modem. And so I started on the bulletin boards with the play by mail systems. And so that's kind of how I started first. And I was able to kind of hide behind the screens because I found that in the very beginning, there weren't a whole lot of females that were playing games, RPGs, or involved in computers. So the first time I kind of let it slip that I was a female, there were a lot of, preteens my age guys that just gave me attention that I really didn't want. I just wanted to be treated like everybody else. So I reassessed myself and I stepped back and I picked a general neutral handle and character and such. And I played a lot of male characters because in the very beginning, female characters kind of got kind of the shaft in a way on some of the uh, ability traits in that. So by playing a male character and having a neutral handle, I was able to just be one of the guys and be accepted. And I found that worked for me.
Gygax's biological determinism didn't work in your favor there, yeah. But
I mean,
yeah.
later and that when it got into, some of the additional changes in that, it was fine and it evened out. But in the very beginning, yeah, I kind of noticed that. So I'm like, well, you know, it kind of works out. I'll play a male character. I'll have a neutral thing and nobody will question anything. So it worked.
So your first game experiences were purely online?
At the very beginning, yes, because I couldn't drive. I mean, I was young,
Mm-hmm.
but I had a modem. I mean, it was 300 baud, but you're talking the early 80s. So
You didn't get together with your friends and play then or anything?
there weren't a whole lot until I got into high school. When I got
Mhm.
into high school, that's when I got involved in more of the in-person and that kind of thing. But I mean, when I started, I was in grade school.
Awesome. So compare that to how you got into your current group. How did you get into the group you're in now? Are you in one?
Which one? I'm in quite a few.
Okay. Okay. Has that experience changed? Is it still purely an online experience for you?
No, I have mixed. Throughout the years, I've done both strictly online and I've done in person, and then I've done some of the groups like for a while there when COVID and all that kind of thing. One of my old high school groups rekindled online. I mean, we
Mhm.
used to play in person, but then going back in that, you know, 20, 30 years later, we were able to go online.
Cool. And I mean, well, we've even played together as well. So what did your first experience look like? What was your first experience with RPGs like? You mentioned it's this dial-up modem mail experience, but as in like mail order experience, but lay that out for kids that whose only concept of a computer is maybe the laptop sitting in front of you. What was that like?
Well, basically, there were multiple ways to play online. Some of it was play by post or PvP, and you would basically list what your character's actions were. And then you would just check back however often you wanted to. If it was a really active server in that, it could be hours. Otherwise, you know, maybe once or twice a day, or maybe if it wasn't a real active thing, you know, a couple of times a week in that. And um, basically, the DM or the BBS sysop in this case would then post what the action was, and you go back and forth. So it was a much slower pace. So you had to kind of, you know, keep track of what was going on paper because it was so slow versus being in a live type of interaction chat or channel that you have immediate feedback and immediate actions, more like a live group. So those are kind of the differences in it. My current basically live groups that I play with, I actually got involved with again after many, many years, decades in fact, was because my youngest had wanted to start playing. And I'm not really a DM. I mean, I can do it, but I wanted her experience to be one that she would get a lot more of. And I didn't want to rob that of her. And so I looked around and I found a local group that meets at a game store twice a month. Well, actually, three times because we also have a third session, which is kind of the same group, but there's a couple extra people in one group and not the other. So three times a month we go and we play in person. So she's able to experience her first game in person. So she loves it. And I'm really appreciative that I'm able to share that with her.
Awesome. Awesome. So you mentioned the, I guess in some ways, headache of keeping track of everything or checking in, maintaining that slow pace, and then eventually getting together and meeting up in person. So, with those being your first experiences, why do you keep playing RPGs?
The main thing with for me is how you're able to expand your own personality into different settings and different characters and how you would possibly, you know, expand and live in these different settings that are just strictly in your mindscape. I mean, where else can you be a magic user, a cleric, or a barbarian? You know, a ninja, or, you know, some of the games fighting in space, or be an alien. I mean, there's multiple other games and that kind of thing. I do play other games besides D&D. So I mean, there's pretty much whatever your mind is out there that I know that there's virtually an RPG for everything nowadays.
Abs. So, what feelings do you get from playing D&D? Does the game ever cause feelings of pleasure or frustration?
I mean, I find it as a major stress relief that I can get away from real life and just enjoy my mindscape with other people that are doing the same thing. I mean, you're leaving your real life behind for, you know, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever time you're spending, and you're just able to enjoy being this fictional fraction of your personality, a facet of it through this character. And I mean, we all get a little bit connected to our characters because we do inject a little bit of ourselves into it. Um, the longer you have the character, I mean, if they die, you're like, oh man. But I
Mhm.
mean, it happens in some of the games more so in some games than others. But by the same token, then you can recreate another facet of your personality in a new character. So there are positives and negatives to a character dying, unfortunately, or fortunately, if you didn't really care for that part of that. But I mean, you're able to disconnect from the real world to be in this, you know, mindscape that everybody else is in there, and everybody is working together to help each other succeed in what you're doing.
I see the focus on success there, which is awesome. I'm in a hard shift in the opposite direction, though. What do you consider failure as a player at the table and as a person?
That's kind of an interesting thought. I think failure happens, and it's more of when personalities don't really click together and how that fractures the group, be it a DM that doesn't, you know, connect with the players, or a specific player, or if there's a player in the group that doesn't connect with the DM, and that actually will affect the whole dynamic that's happening. And so it kind of gets a little uncomfortable. I mean, I've been in a couple of groups like that, and it's like, yeah, do I want to stay with this group? You know, hoping that this player is going to, you know, realize what's going on and change the dynamic back to something that's comfortable and we can work together? Or is the DM going to have to step in and ask that player to leave because the dynamic that was happening with the rest of the group was one that the synergy would build, and there's just that one piece that is causing an issue with the rest of it and preventing that. So I mean, there's a lot of, you know, possibilities, but for the most part, that's kind of few and far between. So I haven't dealt with that for too much, but it does happen. I mean, I've been in a couple of groups where the players just didn't mesh.
Do you think gender has influenced any moments of failure that you've had?
That's kind of a loaded question. I think in the beginning, it definitely did, but because of the way modern society is, and that there are a lot more female players, and females are a lot more accepted and treated as normal people. And I guess when I say normal people, I mean as, you know, the same as male players, that I don't notice it. And it possibly could be the fact that I've been playing so long, I know one extreme. So I don't see it currently. And I don't know if that's because I've lived through the beginning of it and knowing what it used to be. And so I don't see it as being an issue anymore. It may be for somebody that's starting out new in that, or I might be isolated in that where I'm located in that. It's not really been as much of an issue because I am in Wisconsin, and there's a very wide, I mean, the in-person group I play, we had yesterday we played in person and we had 6 players, and 4 of us actually were female. We only had 2 guys in our group last night. So,
And in my home group, it's about a 50-50 split, give or take.
I mean, looking
So
at the cons in that, there is a
mhm.
lot of females that are playing. So I think it, you know, it's gotten to be the fact that, it's an equal opportunity and gender isn't a consideration anymore. But it was a whole lot different, like I said, like 30 years ago. So,
And that's why that's such a thorny question, and why I have to kind of put it to you, is because sometimes it's hard to get, as an academic, I guess, to pull back the curtain. You often have to read into somebody's answer and try and see, okay, does gender play a role here? Does it not, right? And that's what leads to so many kind of competing theories. So it's nice to get a relatively straight answer that definitely in the past, but less so now, is kind of how I would interpret your answer.
I mean, and part of that I think is there's a lot that's over the years have changed. I mean, just in general, if you look at overall acceptance of women doing jobs that were just strictly male dominated. I mean, it's more accepting now, and the same thing that there are more men that are being accepted doing what was considered the pink collar or only female jobs. So I think that kind of is equalizing both directions.
Hmm. Have you or your character ever played through any of these moments of failure?
I guess the only role-playing game that I've played for, an extended decades kind of thing is actually an online game. And because PCs in that, even in the beginning, were generally male dominated, I really didn't have a lot of stigma associated with that. So because of that, I think I made quite a few online friends that are still around. And so I continue to play it, even though it's, old school graphics and all that kind of thing. But because I was never, picked out because I was female, and treated any differently, and I was treated as just another player, is, part of the reason why I've stayed with that game as long as I have.
So now a more topical question, and at least kind of to this channel, or what viewers in this channel might expect. Have you ever played an RPG with a disabled person or persons? I'm going to say other than me here, because we have history of gaming together. If so, would you mind sharing your thoughts or views of that experience?
I mean, I have played with disabled people. I have absolutely no issue. They're another person. They bring their own experiences, their background in that to the game, and you know, all the more power to them. I mean, when I find out they're disabled, I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize it. I'm like, awesome for you. Yeah. Um, it's just, everybody seems to have different challenges in their life, whether it's something that's going on outside of their life. And I'm all for everybody being in the game in that, and I'm going to treat everybody the same. And I hope they treat me the same as well, no matter, what they think of me and such. And so when I find out somebody has a disability, I'm like, I never could tell. And I'm like, it's awesome, but I'm going to treat you the same way, because we're all players here. So I'm not going to treat you any different. And hopefully they appreciate that fact that, I'm not seen as someone that's disabled. I'm seeing them as another player, if that makes sense.
Well, and in some ways, to kind of put on my disability, like, scholar analyst goggles, in some ways, that's very much saying that they've done a good job masking. They've done a good job performing as passing. They've done they're doing a really good job coping, right? Which often to players with disabilities or disabled players, depending on what language you want to use, that's like those three things can often be very critical, right? Because they want to pass. There's this pressure from society to pass as normal, right? So good to hear it. Glad to hear it.
I mean, I
So,
know personally, if
oh, go
I,
ahead.
when people treated me differently because I was female, I didn't like that. I wanted to be treated as a player. I didn't want to be looked at as, this outlier because I was a female. So that's the attitude I take towards people with disabilities. I'm like, they're there to play. They're not there to showcase that they're disabled. They want to just be a player. And so that's how I see it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's some great insight to your experiences in there as well. So is there anything else you'd like to share about your experiences within the RPG community? I mean, I'm sure we haven't covered a third of what you expected to cover. So is there anything that you would like to add?
I mean, I pretty much hope that everybody can go out and look at the RPG community as one that we are individuals with our own experiences, with our own knowledge, with our own wisdom, and with our own challenges, whatever they are, and that we can come together and ignore all of those and just be players and enjoy the mental mindscape that the game involves, and that we can leave all of the real life stuff behind us and just enjoy each other as, fellow gamers.
Awesome. Now, if anybody wants to find you or chat, or is there anything going on in your life that you want to showcase or push to the foreground? Any projects you're working on or anything like that?
I mean, I play on Dungeon Delver on Wednesday nights with Kyle right now with Conflict. We did Traveler earlier. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And then Fridays, I also play Gamma World with the live streams. I will be at GaryCon, and apparently there's going to be a whole local group and all that kind of thing. So I'll be bopping around GaryCon and that, and I'm sure I will make it an annual thing. So if anybody wants to say hi in that, I definitely would be open to say hi. So
Alrighty, dear. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking part in the interview. As always, you're welcome back anytime.